Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Andrew Erickson. Fellas, it's our starts and sits and reacting to waiver wire ads. If we're starting and sitting them, a touchdown calls show. We do a little bit of everything on Thursday mornings. As a quick reminder for everyone, all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Fellas, let's dive right in here for week 8. And we always are going to start with these waiver wire guys. And are we going to start or sit them here in this first week? And I want to kind of do them in groups this week. One group is going to be the 49ers receivers. So Ricky Pearsall, and then Jauan Jennings, who wasn't as available as Pearsall, but was available in some places, also dealing with an injury of his own. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk now out for the season. And, Deebo Samuel, was in the hospital earlier this week. So Fitz, between Jennings and Pearsall, either or both, one or the other, are you starting these guys in week 8?
Oh, wow. There's so many moving parts here, Worm, with the San Francisco wide receivers. So Deebo Samuel is recovering from pneumonia. Could play. We heard Kyle Shanahan say there's a chance, but this is the last game the 49ers play before their bye, so they could potentially give him extra rest. Same goes for Jauan Jennings, who's dealing with a hip issue. So possible they don't chance it with him. And if Jennings plays, I will have him inside the top 30 of my rankings. And if Deebo is out, Jennings probably goes into the top 25. Pearsall is a tougher case because if both Deebo and Jennings play, he's the number 3 receiver, and the number 3 receiver means less for the 49ers than with some other teams because they play a fullback a lot. They go with 2 tight ends sometimes, with Eric Saubert joining George Kittle. So Pearsall's ranking is really up in the air right now. As of now, I believe I have both Deebo and Jennings ranked as if they're going to play. So Pearsall's kind of outside, but like if either of those guys is out, Pearsall is playable.
What do you think, Erickson? What's your interest in these two guys?
I agree with Fitz. I think that Pearsall will be playable if we don't have Jennings play. Even if Deebo plays, I'm kind of looking at the situation where if he's missing practice all week, how heavily involved in the game plan is he going to be, right? You look at Deebo and how he's used. He's a game plan specialist. Kyle Shanahan's going to scheme up stuff for, this is going to be a big Deebo game. If he's not in practice all week, then it's probably, hey, we're going to use Deebo in case of emergency. Less about him being the focal point of the offense. For me, this game screams, give the ball to Jordan Mason 30 times. We're getting McCaffrey back. We're playing the Dallas Cowboys. We don't need Mason for the long run. Let's run him into the ground as much as we can against a really bad Dallas Cowboys run defense. So if I'm Kyle Shanahan, that's my strategy going in. I don't think Jennings is going to play because he has a DNP, opened the week with a DNP because of the hip injury. I think Deebo is more likely to play. It seemed like Shanahan was more optimistic about Deebo coming back. But yeah, I think Pearsall to me is probably a low-end wide receiver 3. Again, we have all the teams back this week. So unless you picked up Pearsall because, I lost Ayuk and Godwin, I don't have receiver depth, and I have to start Pearsall, then I think you can start him if one of those 49ers guys is missed. But if anything, I'm probably still trying to look for alternatives. Again, we have all the 32 teams playing this week, so I don't feel like I need to force in Pearsall, even if one of these 49ers guys misses.
The other group that I wanted to look at was the Tampa Bay pass catchers, and there's even more names here. Obviously, Mike Evans out for a number of weeks, Chris Godwin out for the season. So we have Jalen McMillan, we have Trey Palmer, we have Sterling Shepard, we even have Cade Otton I'll throw in there at tight end, coming off of a really good performance against the Ravens. So Fitz, kind of the same question. Are we interested in starting or sitting any of those guys? You can kind of take whichever name you want here.
I think all of them are flex worthy, maybe even Trey Palmer, although I probably would have the least confidence in Palmer. Interesting call between McMillan and Shepard, and I know McMillan was sort of the favored guy in the waiver run this week. And McMillan is a really good player. Shout out to Debro, who was adamant in the pre-draft process that Jalen McMillan was a better prospect than Jalen Polk. Sorry, Patriots fan Andrew Erickson. But yeah, like Polk has looked terrible, and McMillan, there was a buzz around him in training camp, and now he gets an opportunity to contribute in a big way. But Sterling Shepard has always been a good player. It's just health has always been his issue. And he played some in some pretty bad offenses with the Giants. But it wouldn't surprise me because I do think Shepard is going to be the primary slot guy for the Buccaneers in Chris Godwin's absence. Would not surprise me if Shepard wound up being more valuable in the coming weeks than Jalen McMillan.
What do you think, Erickson? Do you have a favorite one of these guys for this week?
So I still like McMillan. I think that he's going to ultimately take over that slot role, so I just disagree with Fitz. But something I want to point out, and I was looking at the usage between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So if you look at both of them this year, they combined for over 50% of the routes run from the slot. So as we're trying to parse through between, is it Shepard, is it McMillan? Well, realistically, it could be a combination of both guys, right? Operating from the slot. Again, Shepard's been a slot receiver at the NFL level. McMillan played out wide and played in the slot. So I think it's okay for us to kind of take a step back and think it's okay that we don't know exactly what Liam Cohen's going to do. He probably doesn't even know what he's going to do. He's probably trying to figure out, okay, who can I best deploy in this role? I think they drafted McMillan thinking, hey, he can be our Godwin replacement when we move on from Godwin in 2025. Great. Hey, Sterling Shepard's got chemistry with Baker Mayfield. Let's bring him in as a veteran depth piece. And we can throw him in the slot too. So I think we're going to see a combination of both guys operating from the slot. So I would agree. I would rank both of them higher than Trey Palmer. I think is going to take on the outside role, probably the speedster. I like the matchup more in the slot. Again, look at the Falcons defense. They've given up more passes underneath. That's kind of what Baker Mayfield's bread and butter has been this year, just getting the ball out very quickly. We know the Falcons can't generate a lot of pressure. So I still lean on McMillan because I think he has that unknown upside, that unknown potential as a rookie. And going back to week one, he played one less snap in the slot than Chris Godwin. So even when Godwin was playing a full-time slot role in week one, McMillan was right there with him in the first game of the season. So I'm going to lean slightly towards McMillan. But yeah, I think that if you're hurting Shepard, again, especially a guy that's been used in the red zone at times this year, I think that he can also be serviceable as a flex play.
You guys definitely focused on the receivers. Do you think that the answer might just be Cade Otton? I mean, he's ranked inside the top 10 tight ends that we have for this week, both in ECR and in our staff rankings. Fitz?
Yeah, could be. I've got him inside tight end one range. So good chance that he finishes with, 8 to 10 targets this week.
Erickson?
Baker Mayfield trusts Cade Otton. We know that, right? He was throwing him the ball every single time once he lost both of his receivers in last week's game. He's not the most dynamic of tight ends, but hey, if this guy's going to get targets, he should be in your starting lineup pretty much no matter what. We were on the over on Cade Otton receiving yards, and he blew up in the second half, so that was absolutely great to see. So yeah, I think Cade Otton, you need a tight end, start him.
Yeah, he is not dynamic by any means, but any port in a storm for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now.
Yeah. Fitz, who is your flag player for week 8?
It is Cedric Tillman, and I think there is at least a reasonable chance that Jameis Winston has the same sort of effect on the Cleveland passing game that Joe Flacco did last year when he came in for the injured Deshaun Watson. And if it happens, it's going to be very good for David Njoku. And I think it could be pretty good for Cedric Tillman, too. Tillman had 12 targets last week, finished with 8 catches for 81 yards. And let's face it, I mean, Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, we've seen a lot of those guys. I don't think either of them are very good. So we had hope for both guys. They both let us down in the past. Cedric Tillman is the new hope in Cleveland.
Erickson, what do you think about Tillman for this week?
Well, Worm, I'm so glad you asked me this question because every time we've brought up Cedric Tillman in the past, it was, hey, man, this guy is clogging my roster on my dynasty team. What do I do with Cedric Tillman? Because he did nothing as a rookie and he couldn't get on the field for the Cleveland Browns, but now he's got this opportunity without Jerry Jeudy. So if you're going to make me start a Browns receiver, well, I don't want to start Jerry Jeudy. At this point, I don't know what else we need to see from him, where Tillman, I liked him a lot as a prospect coming out. That's why he's on all my dynasty teams because I liked him from Tennessee. Thought he was a better prospect than Jalen Hyatt. So yeah, well, let's roll the dice. It's a good matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. They should be throwing a ton, and Jameis, baby, let it rip.
It is a good matchup. The Ravens secondary also banged up as well. You know, Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens came back in the game, but he was nicked up a little. Nate Wiggins didn't practice on Wednesday. So, it's a secondary that already could be had. And now, with Jameis Winston starting and, even more banged up on the other side, we might see the best offensive performance of the season for the Browns. I wouldn't be totally shocked by that. Erickson, who are you planting your flag on for this week?
Yeah, the Browns have finished under their implied team total in every single game this season. So
haven't they not gotten to 20 points yet? Isn't that?
That seems like it would be accurate if they haven't hit their team total.
Yes, they have not. The most they have gotten was 18, which they got in their only win against the Jags. Every other game, 17, 15, 16, 13, 16, 14.
20 points, baby. Let's go with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
My flag plant is going to be Javonte Williams, who is a player that can seemingly never seem to peg right on the right week, but I didn't want to overthink this one. I didn't want to dive too deep. I know that Fitz went deeper here with the receiver with Cedric Tillman, so kudos to you, Fitz. I'm taking the low-hanging fruit here with Javonte Williams. He beat up on the Saints, horrible run defense on Thursday night, coming off extra rest against this Panthers run defense that ranks dead last against fantasy running backs this year. So, yes, you got to do whatever you can to play Javonte Williams. You have all the running backs this week, but it doesn't matter. You got to get Javonte in there as your RB2 flex. Just start him. Bo Nix is not going to score all the points for the Denver Broncos. I get that he's an interesting streamer this week too, which is, I can't believe we're here, but I think that the Broncos running backs are going to have a lot of success and find the end zone.
Yeah, Fitz, we're going to hit on Javonte a little bit later in the show as well. But just for now, coming off of that game against New Orleans, everybody's really excited because he looked really good and it was the best game of the season, but it was also facing the Saints defense. Having said that, he now gets another bad defense. So it almost doesn't matter if it was because the matchup was poor, because he gets another poor run defense.
Yeah, the two worst run defenses in the NFL back to back. I would start either of you guys against the Carolina Panthers at running back. And this whole thing about the flag plant, Erickson, isn't it? Like you're supposed to be the first guy to reach the summit and put your flag in there. Like there are more flags flying on Javonte Williams than at the United Nations building this week than at Arlington National Cemetery on Memorial Day. I mean, there are a lot of flags on Javonte Williams right now. So your flag is just joining the sea of flags on Javonte.
As long as it's the right flag, that's all that matters.
Yeah, you could consider some of it like planting your flag, like being first. You could also consider some of it just as like, this is your guy. Like if there's one guy to go all in on, it's your all in guy. And that's what it is for Erickson. This roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the number one place to bet touchdowns. Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We just want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. We'll see how it plays out, but Week 8 does look chock full of some blowouts. There are 3 different games with a spread in double digits: Chiefs, Raiders, Broncos, Panthers, and Titans, Lions, plus 3 more with a spread of at least a touchdown: Ravens, Browns, Jets, Patriots, and Saints, Chargers. As always, those lines and odds are subject to change, but wherever they land, the touchdowns might look a bit one-sided this week. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys. One of the first player debates that I wanted to hit on amongst the running backs does include Javonte Williams, and it's him versus Chuba Hubbard in this same game. They are ranked very close in ECR. Erickson, I'll start with you here. You are planting your flag on Javonte, so does that mean you are going with him against Chuba Hubbard?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to go with Williams over Hubbard. I mean, the matchups are on the total 2 ends of the spectrum. Hubbard's playing the Denver Broncos. It's terrible. Bryce Young is starting. That's terrible. They're on the road. It's terrible. So I think this one's easy. Just play Javonte.
Do you see it as easy too, Fitz?
I do. As Erickson pointed out, I think with Bryce Young at quarterback, the Carolina Panthers offense is a no-fly zone for fantasy. Here's how bad the Carolina Panthers run defense has been. So they have allowed a league-high 933 rushing yards to running backs and a league-high 13 touchdown runs to running backs. The last 3 weeks, last week the Commanders running backs combined for 130 rushing yards and a touchdown. 2 weeks ago, it was Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier combining for 200 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And then in week 5, it was DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson combining for 98 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. So perfect setup for Javonte Williams here. And, coming off the good game against the Saints, I think he keeps it rolling.
I agree that this one's clear as well. When I was putting the outline together yesterday, Hubbard was actually one spot ahead of Javonte. That's now switched. They're still very close in ECR, but I think Javonte should clearly be ahead. So we're all in agreement there. Do you guys like are you starting Hubbard at all? Not if he's going up against Javonte, but in other scenarios, are you considering Hubbard, or do you see him as a guy you'd prefer to sit, Fitz?
Yeah, I mean, it could be kind of empty volume. At least he's going to get volume this week. But with Bryce Young, they're probably going to be a bunch of 3 and outs. So maybe the Panthers don't run as many plays as they've been running with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And that sort of short circuits the volume for Hubbard. So I've got him at RB24, which makes him a starter in most leagues. I'm just not excited about it this week.
Where do you have him ranked, Erickson?
RB26, so same range as Fitz. I think that there are definitely worse players you could play than Chuba Hubbard because, again, that wide receiver 3 you're hoping catches a long touchdown or gets 0 points. Well, Chuba has a higher floor. Like, he's a floor play this week. It's a bad matchup. And we saw again, during the beginning of the season, he wasn't nearly as productive with Bryce Young at quarterback. Kind of fell off a little bit last week in a game where they got absolutely blown. And if they get blown out again, you're not going to see a lot of Chuba Hubbard. So I think it's okay to look for alternatives if you want more upside than Chuba. Again, we have all 32 teams active this week. So if you feel, hey, this receiver has more upside, I like this running back I have, matchup is better. Again, looking at players like Stevenson, Rico Dowdle, I think those guys probably have paths to higher ceilings than Chuba Hubbard does. So
why are there no buys this week?
Because the NFL likes money. I don't know. Because they don't like us.
Yeah. And yet they're giving us like 6 teams on bye in week 14, which is brutal.
Yes. And I know people who like that is going to dip into their playoffs, like depending on what your league structure is.
The Scott Fish Bowl. That's that's a playoff week.
Yeah, so I don't totally understand it. Let's go to another running back debate here. Hopefully this one's a bit closer. Rachaad White versus Chase Brown. They're actually back-to-back in our staff rankings. Fitz, I'll start with you here. Rachaad White or Chase Brown in week 8?
Yeah, so it's Chase Brown, a talented and explosive running back playing in a very good and healthy offense. And early in the season, we were kind of hoping that we would get enough touches from Chase Brown every week to move the needle in fantasy. But now, he has established kind of a safe usage floor. He's had double-digit carries in 4 straight games and at least 2 catches in 5 straight. So, he's actually kind of a safe floor play now. But I do think Rachaad White is very much in play as a wide receiver 2 or flex guy this week. I mean, Bucky Irving has looked like the better runner, but we know that Rachaad White is very good as a pass catcher, and it is all hands on deck for the Buccaneers with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans out in the passing game.
What do you think, Erickson? I mean, I think the point about White, the usage that I expect him to get in the passing game with the receivers that they're missing, that definitely intrigues me in any kind of format where catching passes is valuable. He also caught 2 touchdowns, last week. So who do you prefer here, White or Brown?
So before I put Javonte as my flag plan, I was thinking about Rachaad White as my flag plan instead. I hadn't gone into the research yet in that particular matchup, but after I looked at it, I think that Rachaad White, a player that Welsh and I talked about on the trade show, I believe in my trade video, I talked about him as a sell high, coming off the 2 touchdowns. But if you still have him on your roster, I think that he's usable this week. I think that he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game. You look at White in the games that he's played this year, he has the 7th highest target share among running backs this season. That was with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans still in the fold. Bucky Irving opened up the week, DNP with a toe injury. How healthy is he? You look at what he did against the Falcons the last time he played. That season high, 72 rushing yards. Rachaad White, over the last 3 games he's played, 5.4 yards per carry. This is craziness for a player like Rachaad White, who's usually in the 2.5 yards per carry range. So he's been more efficient. They've relied a little bit more on the run game. This offense has been pass heavy with the receivers healthy. I feel like Cohen might change it up a little bit and think, hey, we're our 2 best receivers. We have a healthy stable of running backs that we've seen good performances from Sean Tucker, Bucky Irving, and Rachaad White. I think that it would be interesting to see if they just deploy White as more of a receiver anyway, if he's running routes out of the slot. Again, we always kind of wish cast this during training camp. Oh, this running back's out of the slot. Well, I think back to how the Steelers used to use Le'Veon Bell, and Le'Veon Bell was comped to Rachaad White coming out of the draft. We talked about how great Le'Veon Bell was a receiver. And one of the guys that helped draft Rachaad White because of the Buccaneers was Bruce Arians. Again, another guy that was there with Pittsburgh with Le'Veon Bell. So I think White's going to have a really high floor with the receptions he could get. And I think that we could see Tampa Bay run the ball a little bit more. So again, as bad as my flag plant was on Javonte, a soft flag plant, I will firm stance on because I didn't want people to start Rachaad White over Javonte Williams. I wanted to be clear about that. But I think Rachaad White is firmly in that discussion, I would start Rachaad White over Chuba Hubbard, for example, because I like his floor a little bit more as a pass catcher than Chuba Hubbard. And I think that against the Falcons defense, man, I mean, they're not been a good defense this year. So even without the receivers, I think White has a higher ceiling.
What do you think about that, Fitz? White versus Hubbard?
Oh, yeah. I might even tilt towards, I think in standard or half, I'm starting Hubbard, but in full point PPR, I might go with Rachaad White.
Okay. Let's go to some wide receiver debates here. Terry McLaurin and some, uncertainty at the quarterback position for the Commanders against Jaxon Smith-Njigba, with DK Metcalf looking like he is going to miss at least a week. So McLaurin or JSN? Erickson, I'll start with you this time. Who do you prefer?
This one's tough for me because my heart says Terry McLaurin because he's the better receiver, but I look at the optics. The Bears are not a good matchup for receivers. Number 2 in DVOA versus opposing number 1s, third fewest yards, second fewest targets allowed to number 1 wide receivers this season. And I think we're going to get Marcus Mariota as the quarterback for the Commanders. And I get that he beat up on the Panthers last week, but it was the Carolina Panthers. So I have major concerns about Mariota. We've seen McLaurin struggle at times with bad quarterbacks, basically his entire NFL career. So especially if DK Metcalf doesn't play, I think JSN just has such a high floor with the amount of volume he should see in this matchup. Again, the last time we saw JSN play without Metcalf last year, he had a 29% target share. Again, he only caught 4 passes for 63 yards, but he scored a touchdown. So I'm going to lean towards JSN here just because I don't like the situation as much for Terry McLaurin.
What do you think, Fitz?
Erickson hit on all the right points here. No one wants a wide receiver tied to Marcus Mariota, despite the fact that he looked pretty good against the Carolina defense, which doesn't really count. Outlook for targets very much enhanced for JSN with DK Metcalf out. So it might be another format thing where I think in full point PPR, because even though this has not been a great performance by JSN this season, like he has gotten some empty PPR calories for us. Like he does catch a lot of passes. So I think in full PPR, you have to go with him. But man, if it's standard or half, we know Terry McLaurin is a high quality receiver. And the jury is still very much out on JSN. And obviously it's concerning for McLaurin investors that it's probably going to be Mariota at quarterback this week. But man, I just, when you have a 2-player situation like this, I think more often than not, you are best served by going with a better player, because you could wind up and it's not just about like feeling better about yourself after the call, but if you wind up starting JSN over Terry McLaurin and McLaurin ends up having a good game, you're like, why did I start the inferior player in this situation? I want to err on the side of having the better player. And there's no question in my mind that Terry McLaurin is better than JSN.
Does the format that you're playing in come into play for you, Fitz?
Oh, yeah.
Full
PPR,
yeah.
I'm starting JSN. But in other formats, I'm sticking with McLaurin.
Okay. And we tend to approach these from the perspective of half PPR, kind of splitting the difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to note that in full PPR, given the expected workload, we would lean toward JSN. Same thing for you, Erickson?
I mean, yeah, JSN is a much better play in the full PPR. You look at his catch totals. He's up there with some of the better receivers in terms of like catches per game this season. I think he's around 5.5 catches per game, which is pretty solid. But you look at the yardage totals, you're like, oh, that's why. It's very much slot merchant, as George Pickens would like to put it. So,
yeah. All right, let's get another receiver duo here. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Tank Dell. I did not expect to see Marvin Harrison Jr. ranked in the 20s in ECR at any point this season for the year, but obviously it's been kind of trending that direction given the usage and the performance of Kyler and just the game log week in and week out. Tank Dell and Marvin Harrison Jr. are back-to-back in ECR in half PPR scoring. Dell is wide receiver 23, Marvin Harrison Jr. wide receiver 24 on the week. Erickson, who do you prefer of those two?
I'm going with Tank Dell. I think that he's just screaming for a bounce back game after he went goose egg last week, right? He had 4 targets. He actually had 6 targets overall if you include targets that were eliminated by penalties. But he was targeted in the red zone. If he catches one of those for a touchdown, no one's, oh my God, Tank Dell, 0 points for me. He was close to scoring a touchdown. CJ Stroud's not going to throw for less than 100 yards this week against the Colts. I would be very surprised if that happens back-to-back weeks. So I'm going to roll with Tank Dell. He's at least had his moments recently where Marvin Harrison Jr., we haven't seen really anything good from him since the first quarter of week 2 against the Los Angeles Rams. And I don't know what the numbers are based on how many fantasy points he scored this year, but that one quarter might be more than the rest of the points every other quarter he's played the rest of the season at this point. So I'm going to roll with Tank Dell. I think Marvin Harrison needs the bye week to kind of get things settled in with Arizona, get on the right page with Kyler. And I think that he'll have a strong second half. But right now, I kind of want to keep him on the bench.
That quarter has not outscored every other quarter combined, but it's not far off. That was 27 fantasy points in half PPR scoring. All the other games totals 0.9, 14.9, 13, 4.6, 0, 3.6. So that adds up to like maybe 8 or 9 more combined for every other quarter compared to just that one. It's been pretty discouraging. I mean, he has just even like setting aside like touchdown stuff, his yardage. I mean, again, outside of that quarter, 64 yards against the Lions, and then he hasn't topped 45 in any other game. I mean, it's just been very consistently poor for Marvin Harrison Jr. Fitz, who do you prefer this week? Between Dell and Harrison?
Dell for sure. And just going on about Harrison, I mean, he's averaging only 6.1 targets a game, which is really strange considering that he was the 4th overall draft pick going to a team that was in desperate need for an alpha wide receiver. I know like his target per route run rate is better. And I do think he's going to start to get more comfortable in this offense. Like, don't just, panic trade him. I think the schedule is pretty favorable down the stretch for Harrison, if I recall. So hold on right now, even if you're not playing him, but start Dell. Do not spite bench him because of the shutout last week. I think that was more about the Texans offensive line than it was about Stroud and the receivers. They just could not protect CJ Stroud last week. He got sacked 4 times and was just harassed all day. I don't think that's going to be as much of a problem against the Colts, who have only 14 sacks this year. They're middle of the pack in pressure rate, and we know their outside corners are not very good. So, I think it's going to be a bounce back game for Stroud and Dell.
It's not just last week that Dell has struggled, though. I mean, he only has 1 game in double-digit scoring this season in half PPR. It was the week before, so it was relatively recent in that game against the Patriots, but, kind of similar to Harrison, but without that one big blow-up quarter. Dell does not have more than 62 yards receiving in a game this season. He only has 1 touchdown. He's gotten some 5 receptions in week 3, 7 receptions in week 7, but by and large, like, it's been a struggle for him too. It's not just the goose egg last week. Is that, are you concerned? Like, I mean, I know Erickson, you talked about him as like bouncing back this week, and you said the same thing too, Fitz, but it's really only just been the one good week so far.
Well, that 1 week did happen with Nico Collins not playing. So we got, so again, when you're looking at the situation, he's 1 for 2 without Nico Collins in the lineup. Right. So I'm kind of looking more at that versus the start of the year where we didn't really know how the Texans receiver room was going to shake out. It's clearly Nico Collins is the alpha, then it's Diggs, and then it's Tank Dell. And, Tank Dell's still coming off that broken leg injury. And I think that's probably affected him. And it's something that at least I overlooked heading into the offseason where, oh, he's fine. Like, he's practicing. He looks good. And then you watch him play and you're like, man, like, does he look like the same guy? Maybe not. But eventually, if he gets healthier again, more reps, more games played, I think he's going to start to get going. And I mean, the Colts matchup is just, this is a matchup you want to target for wide receivers. And he's still CJ Stroud's guy. And it's not like Diggs is blowing him out of the water without Nico Collins in the lineup. So I think you got to go back to Dell.
If you like Dell this week, you might want to bet on some of his props. And if you do, we've got a special offer for you all. Unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today and use promo code FPFREE. Again, that's FPFREE. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it for free for 1 month now. Only available on iOS. Again, that's FPFREE is the code for Betting Pros Premium.
Forced to go rogue, hunted from within. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Developed by Treyarch and Raven, Black Ops 6 is a mind-bending narrative and unbound by the rules of engagement. This is signature Black Ops. Dynamic moment-to-moment gameplay, including a variety of play spaces with blockbuster set pieces, action-packed moments, high-stakes heists, and cloak and dagger spy activity. Best-in-class multiplayer experience will test your skills across 16 new maps at launch, including 12 core 6v6 maps and 4 strike maps that can be played 2v2 or 6v6, marking the epic return of round-based zombies. The fan-favorite mode where players will take down hordes of the undead in 2 brand new maps at launch. You can look forward to even more exciting maps and groundbreaking experiences in both multiplayer and zombies. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is a spy action thriller set in the 90s by the end of the Cold War and the rise of the United States as a single superpower. Head over to callofduty.com/Black Ops 6 and get in the game. Call of Duty Black Ops 6, available now.
Rated M for mature.
All right, guys, let's get into some of our more rapid fire start sit decisions. Another running back here, Bucky Irving versus Austin Eckler. Erickson, what do you think about this one?
I'm going to go with Bucky Irving here. I know I talked glowingly about Rachaad White earlier, but the one thing White doesn't have in the backfield for the Buccaneers is the red zone usage. That has clearly been put into Bucky's hands, and I'm just really looking at touchdown equity here between Bucky and Austin Eckler. So I would say that the Buccaneers probably have a better chance of scoring just because they're playing the Falcons defense. They don't have Marcus Mariota as their quarterback. So I'm going to lead towards Bucky because both guys are in committees, but I think Irving has a better chance at a touchdown.
And by the way, on Irving, just keep an eye on him on the injury reports this week. Are they playing tool on FantasyPros.com does like him to play as of right now, but definitely just want to keep an eye on that. Fitz, what do you think, Eckler or Irving this week?
I will second Erickson on Bucky, assuming he plays. It just stands to reason that the Tampa offense is going to be more RB centric this week in the absence of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Eckler just not getting a real steady dose of touches. He's only had double-digit touches in 2 of his 6 games so far this season, and the matchup against Chicago is not an easy one. So I'll go with Bucky here.
How about a wide receiver? Amari Cooper, now in game 2 with his new team, did catch a touchdown in his first game with the Bills against Jaylen Waddle, who gets his quarterback back finally. And obviously has been an extremely frustrating and unusable season for Waddle so far. But you'd expect an upgrade with Tua there. So Amari Cooper versus Jaylen Waddle. Fitz, who do you like?
I'll go with Cooper. I mean, just 5 days after joining his new team, he clicked well enough with Josh Allen to have catch 4 of his 5 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown. The matchup against Seattle is pretty good, and being tied to Josh Allen is certainly worth something. And I do love Jaylen Waddle. I've got him ranked as a mid-range wide receiver too. I know everyone wants the Miami dance party to start up again, and maybe it does happen this week in a good matchup against the Cardinals. But I just love to have that show me game from the Dolphins offense before we plunge in on Waddle and Tua. I think we're starting Tyreek Hill, of course, but and I know a lot of people aren't going to have the luxury of doing that with all the wide receiver injuries and are going to have to play Waddle. But if you have an alternative as good as Amari Cooper, I think I'd go with the alternative.
Erickson?
I'm starting Jaylen Waddle. He's on all my teams.
Unsurprising, yeah.
He's on all my teams, and I've waited month long for him to be my lineup. My teams need him, so Fitz, I respect your opinion about waiting for the Dolphins. I can't afford to do this, so I'm firing out Jaylen Waddle everywhere. I don't think Cooper's a bad play either, but I have Waddle. It's more about the principle, if anything.
Trust me, I am much more heavily invested in Waddle than in Amari Cooper. So yeah, I'm playing him a lot too. I'm just saying if I had this choice, I would go with Cooper.
Erickson's fantasy team name in every league is America's Next Top Waddle. So that tells you.
After week 1, man, 100 yards, I felt great. I felt justified being just like, Waddle, what a great second round pick. And then Thursday night happened, and it's been downhill ever since. But hey, Tyreek Hill said himself, fire me up. All these Dolphins, baby, against the Cardinals. Come on, let's go.
Let's look at some flex decisions here. How about Nick Chubb going up against Davante Adams? Who do you prefer here, Erickson?
I'm going to go with Davante Adams. Again, it's a really tough matchup here for Nick Chubb. Again, he's playing it's the Ravens, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that the Buccaneers had some success running the football, surprisingly, but Nick Chubb, I know he scored last week, but he had nowhere to run. And if he hadn't scored the touchdown, he would have been a pretty much 0 for your lineup. So I'm going to go with Davante. Again, first game with the Jets. He still got decent usage, 9 targets. And I thought it was interesting that him and Garrett Wilson both kind of played in the slot. So you're not going to see Christian Gonzalez lock up on one of these guys. It's going to be a rotation, and whoever's in the slot is going to get the favorable look. So I think the Jets steamroll Patriots, the Patriots defense. Again, there's this mystique around the Patriots defense being good. It's not good. It's not good against the run. It's not good against the pass. It's horrible. So we saw the Jets take care of business against the Patriots earlier this year. It was the one time the Jets offense looked really good. And I think we're going to see that again, even on the road. So I'm going to roll with Devontae.
What do you think, Fitz?
Devontae also walked right into 9 targets in his first game with the Jets. And as Erickson said, the defensive matchup is nothing to fear. It was encouraging, I think, that Chubb got 11 carries right out of the gate, but I don't think that number rockets up to 18 or 20 this week. And Worm, we know how to move the ball against the Ravens. It's not on the ground. It's take advantage of that Swiss cheese secondary.
Like the best case scenario for Chubb is exactly what happened last week, where they got to the 1 yard line on a pass interference and then he scored from the 1 yard. Like that is how Chubb hits again in this matchup against the Ravens, who the Jameis Winston should be able to throw on. So
I may be a little more interested in Chubb than you guys are, I guess. He has been good against the Ravens in the past. He's had some very big plays, some very big games against them. And I wonder, like, obviously, it's still only his second game back from a very devastating injury, so you don't know 100% what he's going to look like. But I just do expect the offense to be better now that they got rid of the worst quarterback in football. Didn't get rid of him. I mean, obviously he got hurt, but like the worst quarterback in football is no longer starting for this team. I think Jameis can move the ball. He might have some turnovers sprinkled in, but I think Jameis can move the ball in the secondary. I think there will be touchdown scoring opportunities for Chubb. And I think this team, like the only good vibes they have rolling right now, beyond whatever Winston brings, is Nick Chubb being back on the field. So I think like they're going to try to get him opportunities to score touchdowns. I think the offense will be like, maybe they're not going to drop 40 points, I certainly hope, but I think it'll be a clear step up with Jameis Winston. That's my expectation at least. And I think Chubb can benefit from that. So I think Chubb is, I think it may be a better play than you guys seem to think.
Worm, what I'm hearing is you're taking the Browns with the points. Browns plus 9.5, right? That's what it sounds like to me, because that's one of my best bets.
I think 9.5 is a lot of points for.
Dude, I'm taking the Browns, baby, at home.
I think it's a talented defense. I do expect the Ravens to score a lot of points in this one, but it's a talented defense, so there's a chance they could struggle. But more importantly than that is, like, I just there's a huge upgrade from Deshaun Watson to Jameis Winston, and also the Ravens secondary is beat up. Like I would be very scared. The Ravens would need to be up by like 18, 21 points in the fourth quarter for me to feel good about laying the points with them.
I feel good about having the Browns. I got Winston, baby. He's going to be getting this team some
It's a lot of points. So yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't call it maybe a best bet of the week for me personally, but like I think that's probably the correct side to be on in this one. Divisional matchup in Cleveland. I'll be at this game, by the way, with the FantasyPros folks. We're doing a trip this weekend, so I'll be seeing a lot of our coworkers, which will be super fun.
So you got to take the Browns then if you're going to beat.
I most certainly do not. Got to take the Browns. All right, let's go to another flex here. How about Chris Olave versus Alexander Mattison? This is an extremely depressing question to even be posing compared to what I thought about these guys before the season. Fitz, Olave or Mattison, who do you like this week?
Yeah, depressing and difficult, Worm. This one was pretty diabolical, if I do say. So Mattison had 26 touches last week. He has pretty clearly supplanted Zamir White as the lead back in Las Vegas. But, I mean, this is likely to be very empty volume this week for Mattison against this Chiefs run defense, which is just airtight. And obviously, Olave has problems of his own with a fifth-round rookie at quarterback and a tough matchup against the Chargers, who've allowed the third fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. But I did say earlier on the show that in situations like this, I want to go with the superior player, and no doubt in my mind, Olave is a better player than Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, this is one of the more extreme examples of just simple who the best player is very clear in our opinions. Erickson, who do you prefer, Olave or Mattison?
I'm also going to go with Chris Olave here. No Shaheed. I don't know what the targets are going to be like from Spencer Rattler, but I think that Olave is probably going to out-target Bub Means, Mason Tipton, insert another Saints player I've never heard of that's going to be on the field as well. So I'm going to go with Olave as well.
Cedric Wilson.
Cedric Wilson. Juwan Johnson, who Fitz hates, and rightfully so.
All right, how about another guy benefiting from Tua coming back, Raheem Mostert, obviously more in the running game side, against Darnell Mooney, who's been a lot better than expected this season. Erickson, I'll start with you here. Mostert or Mooney?
I like Mooney. I think that this is one of the matchups where you're looking at Mooney as a wide receiver 3 flex play that has a ton of upside. We saw him go off the last time we played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that Jamel Dean is also dealing with an injury. So one of their healthier cornerbacks, one of their top guys, is potentially going to miss this game. So yes, Mostert's set up really well here against the Cardinals, but he lost a fumble last week. Devon Chan clearly played ahead of him. Jalen Wright continues to look pretty good. So I'm not so sure what the volume looks like for Raheem Mostert. So I'm going to go with Mooney just in a smash matchup where he's been a little bit quiet the last couple weeks. You could see him blow up like he did a couple weeks ago against the same defense.
Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, agree. We don't know what the volume's going to look like for Mostert. Like, I do think Achane is sort of surged to the top of that depth chart, and it's not really the same sort of split we saw last week. And I don't think the Cardinals are necessarily this great matchup. Look what they did to J.K. Dobbins on Monday night. So they 14 carries, 40 yards. So yeah, and Mooney is like top 10 in wide receiver targets, I believe. So Mooney, an easy call here. Yeah, slam dunk.
Another flex here. I really wanted to get one with Rachaad Bateman in here coming off of his strong game against Tampa Bay. There weren't a ton of great running back options that were ranked kind of near him. So this is obviously assuming, if Jonathan Taylor is not playing, Tyler Goodson, who has looked like kind of the better backup option for Indy against Rachaad Bateman, who the volume hasn't totally been there, but the explosive plays have. And as explosive as this offense is playing right now, that feels to me like something I'd like to lean into, or kind of the more security, again, assuming Taylor is out of the volume we'd expect from Goodson. Erickson, who do you prefer here?
When in doubt, go with the Ravens player because they're going to score the most touchdowns every single week. And I think that you have the best chance of getting a touchdown with a Baltimore player in your lineup. So Bateman for me, Zay Flowers is a bit banged up. We know he missed practice on Wednesday, dealing with the ankle injury. I mean, he wasn't used at all. He looked like good on the first drive, got banged up, and then was never heard from again. So I think that Bateman could continue to be involved. Again, we're going to chase the tight ends potentially too, as we'll get into as well with the Ravens. But I think that Bateman's probably the play here.
Yeah, Fitz, what do you think? Just 4 receptions in each of the last 3 games for Bateman, but 58 yards and a touchdown, 71 yards, 121 yards and a touchdown. They've been good games, even if the volume hasn't totally been there.
Yeah, so it would be Bateman. I do think that Jonathan Taylor is probably more likely to play than Zay Flowers this week. It seems like our guy, Dr. Deepak Chona, doesn't think that Flowers is on the right side of questionable. So that even if Taylor were to be out, Goodson, I think, has sort of pushed past Trey Sermon, but not clearly. Like it might be sort of a 60-40 split in Goodson's favor. So I'm going to go with Bateman here.
Would Flowers being out actually possibly hurt Bateman in your eyes just because he might get the Denzel Ward treatment?
Maybe. But I don't know. That versus the brighter target outlook, maybe kind of a push.
Yeah. Erickson, what do you think?
I mean, you just got to Bateman's getting targets. That's all I really care about. So if Flowers is out and that means more opportunities for Bateman, maybe they can use him a little bit differently as opposed to just more as that vertical threat, which has kind of been his role when Flowers. I mean, we know Bateman, his first round pick, we know he's a good player. It's just a matter of the opportunities. And if the opportunities are there now with Flowers out, I don't think you're going to go wrong attaching yourself to Lamar Jackson. Again, the guy is on absolute fire. He's going to win the MVP at this point. So if I get his number 1 wide receiver, Bateman, yeah, give it to me.
Let's look at a quarterback here. Really interesting one. Tua Tagovailoa or Bo Nix? Who do you prefer, Fitz?
I'm going with Bo Nix. He has 255 rushing yards this season and 3 touchdown runs in his last 2 games. He has run for 61 and 75 yards. He has really turned into this sneaky Konami code quarterback, sort of the guy we were hoping Anthony Richardson was going to be this year. He's also thrown 4 touchdown passes in his last 3 games, and he's up against the Carolina Panthers, who made Marcus Mariota look good last week. I will take him over Tua.
Erickson?
I'm still going to take Tua. I'm just buying the Dolphins this week. I just think that they can get it done. It's going to get all fixed because they got him back. They got their guy back. So I do agree Bo Nix is a good play. And you have Bo Nix ranked ahead of Richardson this week, right, Fitz?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. And Tua. I'm being a little cautious with Richardson this week. I've got him, I think, QB 18.
With tight end, I wanted to ask about Mark Andrews now that he has 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Like, it was obviously just like such a famous disappointment in the first part of the year. And now, like, to whatever degree that, obviously touchdowns are really valuable. So like, he's starting to look more like a starter again. So I threw him up against a handful of different tight ends that are all kind of ranked in the same range to see which of these guys you would be starting Mark Andrews over. So Mark Andrews versus any of Cole Kmet, Dalton Kincaid, Hunter Henry, or Pat Freiermuth. Again, Kmet, Kincaid, Hunter Henry, or Freiermuth. Fitz, of those guys, are you starting Mark Andrews over any of them?
It's so cute, Worm, that you're trying to get a win for your guy Mark Andrews here. I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to have him at the top of this heap. It's going to be Dalton Kincaid. Like, he's I can't say things have been good with Kincaid, but at least he's been consistently mediocre this season and giving you sort of a catch and yardage floor. The thing about Mark Andrews, yeah, he is on a touchdown heater right now, but like, he's still not getting a lot of targets, not running a lot of routes. The usage is still pretty concerning. And I am right now ranking Mark Andrews as if Zay Flowers is going to be out, and I've still got him 1 spot behind Dalton Kincaid. But I do have him, I do have him ahead of everyone else on this list. So I've got Kincaid, tight end 12, Andrews 13, Hunter Henry 14, Kmet 16, and Freiermuth 19.
Okay, so but Andrews is still outside the top 12 of the position for you.
Just outside, yes.
Erickson?
If Zay Flowers doesn't play, I'm going to play him over all these guys. So I would play Andrews over Kincaid, Henry, Kmet, Freiermuth.
Andrews, for the record, has been very good against the Browns in his career. I think he has something like 9 touchdowns in 11 career games since Lamar became the starter or something like that. And a lot of those games, he's caught a lot of passes. He's been in that 60, 70, 80 receiving yard range. So Andrews has performed well against the Browns in the past.
Although the matchup this year says play Kincaid over Andrews, because I think the Seahawks have given up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends. The Browns have given up the 4th fewest to tight ends. So not a great matchup for Andrews.
Yeah. Andrews is in ECR, just for the record. He's tight end 15, and these guys are tight end 12, 13, 14, and 16. So he's kind of right in the middle of them based on the consensus around the industry. Say goodbye to start-sit dilemmas with FantasyPros Start-Sit Assistant. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the Start-Sit Assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. All right, guys, let's wrap up with the touchdown calls contest. This week, I am on running back. I am going to take Nick Chubb. As I described before, he has had some very good games against the Ravens. I think this offense is going to look better than we've seen the entire season. And I think that when they're in close, they're going to want to get Chubb as many touchdowns as they can this year. So I'm going to go with Nick Chubb at running back. Erickson, who do you have at receiver?
Jaylen Waddle. It's my guy. Arizona, 7th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. Waddle hasn't scored since week 15 of last year. He has 1 game this year with Tua, 100 yards. Trust the process. Let's go.
Fitz, you've got tight end.
I am going to take the Mormon missile, Taysom Hill. He is expected back from a rib injury. Also back at practice this week for the Saints center Cesar Ruiz, which would be very big for the Saints offensive line. And look, New Orleans has a 5th-round rookie, Spencer Rattler, at quarterback. Alvin Kamara is playing with a broken hand. It stands to reason that we're going to get a big dose of Taysom Hill, maybe a lot of wildcat action for the Saints this week. Taysom Hill is going to get into the end zone at least once.
Let's wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week. Best of luck with all of your Week 8 decisions. You can get more questions answered on Discord if you want to head there and hit up Fitz and Erickson on their channels on Discord, or hit us up on Twitter or anywhere else. So thank you for tuning in. Best of luck, and we'll see you again next week.